You're listening to the story The Town Mocked a Grieving Widow Until Her Son Spoke the Truth, only on American Echoes. A tale of heartbreak, judgment, and the quiet bravery that changed everything. The Montana wilderness has a way of teaching you what matters. When the wind howls through the cottonwoods and the sky threatens snow in early October, you learn to prioritize, quickly chop wood, patch the roof, keep the fire alive, and pray you don't break under the weight of it all. That morning, the sun had just risen over the pines when Ida Thornwick's axe slipped from her blistered hands and sank into the dirt beside the woodpile. Her breath came in sharp, shallow bursts. She pressed her palms against her face, not just to wipe the sweat, but to stop the tears she could no longer justify. The logs towered in front of her like a silent accusation. You'll never make it. Through winter, it had been 3 weeks since Samuel, her husband, her partner, the only person who had ever understood her silences, was killed in the mine collapse. One moment, he was there. The next, the ground swallowed him whole. Then the mine bosses offered her a stiff apology and a month's wages. That was it. Since then, Ida had woken before the sun and worked long after it set. She chopped wood until her back screamed. She cooked thin meals and sewed patches onto patches. She tried to smile when Clara and Jimmy asked if things would be okay. But the truth was, she didn't know anymore. She couldn't afford help. And even if she could, accepting it in Copper Ridge came with consequences. This was a town where everyone knew your business, and a single rumor could strip you of what little dignity you had left. So she worked and worked. And today, it finally caught up to her as she bent to retrieve the axe. She heard the unmistakable rhythm of hoofbeats approaching. Her spine straightened and her jaw clenched. She couldn't afford to look weak. Not in front of whoever it was. From the bend in the trail came Montgomery Caldwell, seated tall on his chestnut mare. His presence alone made Ida's chest tighten. Everyone knew Monty Caldwell, the wealthiest landowner in 3 counties, the man whose cattle outnumbered the town's population. He was respected, even feared, and now, for some reason, he was headed straight for her. He pulled up near the fence, tipping his hat. "Morning, Mrs. Thornwick." Ida nodded curtly. "Nest." Caldwell. He dismounted, slow and deliberate, keeping his hands visible like a man approaching a wild animal. "Didn't mean to startle you." He didn't. She grasped the axe again, though her arms trembled. Monty looked at the unsplit wood, then at her chapped hands, then back again. His brows furrowed. "I've been watching from my ridge," he said gently. "You've been out here every day since your husband passed. I admire your strength, ma'am, but that's a mighty pile of wood." "I'm managing," she said through clenched teeth. "I know you are, but managing shouldn't mean breaking." Ida's grip on the axe tightened. "I've got 3 men," Monty continued. "They could split and stack all that in half. Day. No cost, no obligation." Ida's eyes narrowed. "No obligation. There's always something, Mr. Caldwell." He looked away, then back at her, and his voice softened. "There doesn't have to be." For a moment, the weight of those words almost broke her. The idea of someone helping simply because they could felt foreign, dangerous even. She opened her mouth to answer, but her pride got there first. "Thank you, but no. We're fine." Monty nodded, clearly not surprised. "If you change your mind." Before he could finish, a distant voice called out from the trail. Well, early morning for a social visit, ain't it?" Ida turned sharply to Cornelius Brim. Of all the people she didn't want to see, he reined in his wagon just close enough to catch the scene. A widow and a rancher standing a little too close for town standards. His thin smile was slick with false courtesy. "Good morning, Cornelius," Monty said with measured calm. "I dare say the whole valley'll be buzzing when they hear how neighborly you've been, Caldwell." Ida could feel the trap tightening. Cornelius didn't need evidence, just an audience. She crossed her arms. "Mr. Brim, I believe your business lies elsewhere. Oh, I'm just a concerned citizen, he drawled. After all, appearances matter. Monty's jaw tensed. Leave it alone, Brem. But the damage was done. Ida could already imagine the whispers about impropriety, hidden motives, favors, traded for something more. Cornelius tipped his hat with mock politeness and drove off. A dust cloud trailing behind him like smoke from a slow-burning fire. Ida turned to Monty, the axe still in her hand. You see what you've done? He looked genuinely pained. I didn't come to stir gossip. I came to help. Tensions don't matter here, she snapped. Only what people think happened. I'm sorry. I decide. You want to help? Then leave me alone. Monty hesitated. Then he nodded once and walked back to his horse. As he rode off, Ida stood in the yard, heart pounding. The wind picked up, whistling through the trees like a warning. She looked at the axe in her hand, the logs piled high, the cabin in the distance, where her children waited, and she wondered how long she could keep this up, not just the work, but the pretending. The cold had teeth, and it bit hard that night, inside the Thornwick cabin. The fire crackled weakly in the hearth, barely strong enough to warm the small space. Clara sat near the embers, mending one of Jimmy's socks with a needle and thread. Too fine for her 8-year-old fingers. Jimmy lay curled on the cot, watching his sister with wide, quiet eyes. Ida stirred a pot over the fire-thin soup made from scraps, bones, and a prayer. She hadn't eaten since breakfast. Not really. She told the children she'd already eaten earlier. Quote, but the hollowness in her stomach said otherwise. Behind her calm voice and tired smile lived a woman running on empty, and her children knew it. Clara glanced up from her stitching, her voice small but sharp. Mama, are you okay? Ida turned, forcing a smile. Course, darling. Just tired. But Clara didn't believe her. She'd heard the sobs at night when Mama thought they were asleep. She'd seen how Mama's hands trembled when she held the axe. She'd noticed the way her clothes hung looser these days, how her cheeks had hollowed. Me noticed 2 children always do. That afternoon, they had both watched from the cabin window when the tall man rode up. Clara had whispered, "That's Mr. Caldwell," as if she were talking about a storybook figure. Jimmy had said nothing, just pressed his face to the glass, his breath fogging the pain. They had seen Mama's face, tired, proud, fierce, and they had seen the other man's, gentle, patient, kind. But even as young as they were, both children understood something that no grown-up had said aloud. If Mama accepted help, people might think she was weak. Or worse, they might say ugly things, because in Copper Ridge, people didn't just talk. They judged. Later that night, when Ida thought they were asleep, she sat by the fire and stared into the flames. She held Samuel's old flannel shirt in her lap, running her fingers over the worn fabric. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. I'm trying so hard, but I can't. I don't think I can keep this up." The wind howled outside. The logs cracked in the hearth and upstairs under the quilt. Jimmy listened with wide, watery eyes. The next morning, Ida was outside again before sunrise, splitting logs with the same defiant rhythm axe. Split, stack, the soreness in her back screamed louder than it had the day before. But she ignored it. She had to. Halfway through the morning, she heard small footsteps behind her. "Jimmy, Mama, can I help?" She turned, instantly softening. "Sweetheart, your job is to be a kid. Let Mama worry about this." He hesitated, eyes wide. "But I heard you last night." Ida froze. "I heard you talking to Papa's shirt. I heard you say, you can't do it." Her heart twisted in her chest. "Jimmy, before she could respond, hoofbeats approached again. Monty, he dismounted the same way as before, slow, respectful. "Morning, ma'am," he said. Ida didn't answer at first. Her grip on the axe faltered. Jimmy stepped forward, ignoring both their protests. "Mister," he said, voice high and fierce, "please don't listen to Mama. We do need help." Auntie blinked in surprise. "Mama's hands are all cut up. She don't eat so me and Clara can. She cries at night. She talks to Papa's picture when we're asleep." Jimmy Ida gasped, utterly exposed. But the boy kept going. "I don't care if people talk, Connie. I just want my mama to stop hurting." Monty crouched down to meet the boy's eye. His face, usually so composed, was stricken. "You're a brave boy," he said. Then another voice broke the moment. "I'm brave too," Clara called from the doorway. She walked out slowly, holding something close to her chest. It was her father's Bible. "I found this last night," she said. "Papa always said it was important to help people. And he said that if someone offers help without asking for something, in return, it's okay to accept." She stopped next to Jimmy and opened the Bible. "Carry each other's burdens, and in this way we'll fulfill the law of Christ." Galatians 6:2. Ida stared, overwhelmed. She dropped the axe. It thudded softly in the dirt. Her knees gave out. She knelt on the ground and covered her face with her hands. Monty didn't speak. He just stood there, waiting, and in the silence, decision began to form, not out of pride, but out of something deeper, out of love. The morning sun had barely crested the distant hills when the sound of wagon wheels, crunching over gravel, reached the Thornwick homestead. Ida, still kneeling beside the axe, slowly lifted her head. The calm from the children's words still lingered in the air, fragile, like frost on a window pane. But it shattered the moment she saw who was coming. Cornelius Brim, his spindly frame sat atop a rickety wagon. Reins in one hand, smugness in the other. He was alone this time, but the way he slowed his wagon just a few feet from her fence meant he didn't need an audience. He was already rehearsing his story for them. "Morning again," Cornelius said, pretending civility as his beady eyes took in the scene, the kneeling widow, her children, standing beside a stranger, and Monty Caldwell's horse tied to the post. "How sweet," he continued, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "A community gathering." Monty straightened his shoulders. "Keep riding, Brim." But Cornelius didn't budge. He leaned forward, twisting the knife, just making sure everything's proper, given the circumstances. After all, people do talk. Ida rose slowly. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned like the forge. "Are you implying something?" "Implying? Oh no, ma'am. I'm simply observing." Cornelius cuckolded. "Call it what you want. But a widow, a rancher, and no chaperone. Why? Someone might get the wrong idea." Monty stepped forward, voice low and firm. "You need to leave." "Don't worry," Cornelius said, pulling at the reins. "I'll be sure to share what I saw with concern, of course. It's just neighbors looking out for each other." As he trotted off, Ida clenched her fists, her breath caught in a throat knot, from fear but fury. She turned to Monty, her voice quiet but cutting. "You shouldn't have come back." "I'm sorry," he said, sincere. "I didn't know Brim would. He didn't need to come. The town was already watching me. Tear me apart." She looked down at her children, Jimmy, with wide, worried eyes, Clara clutching the Bible to her chest like armor. "They'll say I traded reputation for firewood." Monty looked genuinely hurt. "That's not what this is." "I know," she said. "But it's not what they'll believe." Word spread fast in Copper Ridge. By noon, the local postmaster was whispering about it over stamped letters. By 2, Mrs. Carson from the bakery had paused mid-roll, flowers still on her apron, to whisper scandal between gasps. By sunset, it was gospel. The rich rancher, the desperate widow, alone, together. Reverend Marcus Thorne heard about it before his evening prayers. Banker Edmund Cross received a letter from Cornelius urging an urgent discussion. Sheriff Morrison tired, fair, and already regretting his badge found, his front porch crowded with townsfolk, expecting action. That night, Ida stood over her stove, stirring a pot of soup she wasn't sure she could swallow. The day had been long. Her name had been passed from porch to porch, her worth weighed in half-truths and whisper campaigns. I shouldn't have let him near us, she muttered, almost to herself. But Mama, Clara said from the table, he only wanted to help. Ida stared at her daughter. Sometimes, baby, that's not enough. The next morning, 5 riders came down the Thornwick Trail. Monty had returned again. But this time, he was followed by others, some summoned, others self-appointed. Cornelius led the charge, practically glowing with self-importance. Behind him rode Reverend Thorne, stiff-backed and solemn. Banker Cross looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, but his presence spoke volumes. Sheriff Morrison brought up the rear, eyes hidden beneath his hat. Ida stepped out onto the porch with her children, still in their NIGHTCLOTH. Monty stood, tall beside her. He'd come early, having heard the gossip and choosing to face it rather than run. Mrs. Thornwick, Reverend Thorne began, his voice stiff with forced piety. The congregation has raised concerns regarding recent events. Events? She asked coldly. The banker cleared his throat. Improper associations, financial irregularities, and reputation risks. Ida almost laughed, 'cause a man offered to split firewood. Cornelius leaned forward in his saddle. 'Cause appearances matter, dear lady, and a decent woman would know better. That was when something snapped. Ida stepped forward. No, a decent man wouldn't weaponize my grief to feed his need for gossip. Cornelius opened his mouth to respond, but didn't get the chance. With the speed of a lightning strike, Ida's open palm met his cheek. The sound cracked through the air like a pistol shot. The men reeled. Even Monty blinked in shock. Clara gasped. Jimmy grinned. Ida's voice trembled, but not from fear. I'm tired, she said, of pretending I don't need help. Tired of starving in silence because of cowards like you who twist kindness into scandal. She turned to Monty. And I'm sorry I made you feel guilty for doing what no one else had the courage to. Reverend Thorne lowered his head. Sheriff Morrison coughed. The banker looked away, ashamed. Cornelius, red-faced and sputtering, turned his horse around without another word. The damage had been done, but not the kind he intended, because in the silence that followed, the townsfolk finally began to ask themselves, had they let their fear of gossip make them cruel? The silence after Ida's slap was long and heavy. It wasn't just Cornelius's cheek that stung his pride. His plan and his influence all took the blow. Without another word, he wheeled his horse around and rode off in a flurry of embarrassment. His earlier smugness reduced to dust behind his wagon wheels. No one moved, not the Reverend, not the banker, not even Sheriff Morrison, who stared off into the trees, the weighing sins deeper than he could speak aloud. Ida stood tall, her breathing steady now, her hand still trembling from the force of it all, not just a slap, but the truth she'd finally voiced. She had fought to keep her children fed, warm, and safe. But today, she had fought for something else, her right to survive without shame. Monty looked at her with something close to awe. That, he said quietly, took more strength than anything I've seen on a cattle drive. Ida gave a faint, tired smile. I'm just tired of pretending. Then, out of nowhere, the deputy DISMOUNTED. Deputy Brennan, known for saying little and watching much, stepped forward and removed his hat. If you don't mind, Mrs. Thornwick, he said softly, I've chopped enough firewood in my life to be of some use. And I reckon this is more important than polishing the badge. Today, his words settled over the group like a soft snowfall, gentle but meaningful. Ida blinked. "You're offering to help?" He nodded. "Can't sit back and watch good folks suffer just because others are scared of wagging tongues." Monty looked at him, surprised. "Thank you, Brennan." The ripple began. Behind them, from the ridge trail, 3 more riders appeared, Monte's ranch hands, who had come looking for their boss. As they approached and saw the crowd, one of them dismounted with a knowing smile. "Guess it's time to stop pretending the boss didn't care." One by one, they tied their horses and grabbed tools. But the most unexpected arrival came walking Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, the town's schoolteacher, and the one person whose approval still meant something in Copper Ridge, arrived on foot, carrying a basket. "Montgomery Caldwell," she called, "I hope you're not planning to do all the work yourself. I brought bread. Someone's got to keep the workers fed." Then she turned to Ida. "And you, dear, stop worrying about appearances. The children need a warm home more than they need your pride." Ida couldn't respond. Her throat was tight with tears. Monty stepped forward then and pulled a folded piece of paper from his coat. "I was going to tell you later," he said to Ida, "but your mortgage is paid. Current, as of this morning." For a moment, time stopped. "My what?" Ida whispered. Monty didn't boast. He didn't smirk. He just nodded. The bank was circling. "I didn't want them getting their claws in. Consider it a neighbor's investment in decency, even Reverend." Thorne looked humbled now. "We owe you an apology," he said quietly. "Both of you." Mayor Walsh, who had arrived late on his dapple-gray horse, nodded solemnly. "And if Mr. Caldwell still needs those hands to finish the job today," he added, "then, I believe, several of us would be honored to lend ours." The woodpile that had haunted Ida for weeks was gone by sundown. In its place stood a neat stack of split logs, covered and secured with canvas, ready for the winter. The fence had been repaired, a new coat of sealant applied to the cabin roof, and inside, the fire glowed brighter than it had in months, not just from the fuel, but from what had changed outside those walls. That evening, as the townsfolk lingered and shared stories over fresh bread and stew, Clara sat quietly by her mother and looked up. "Mama," she whispered, "remember what you told me when Mrs. Patterson brought us those jars of preserves after Papa passed?" Ida tilted her head. "What did I say?" "You said, sometimes accepting kindness is its own kind of courage." The words came back to her like a hymn, words she had forgotten while drowning in grief and fear, words she had taught her daughter, but had struggled to believe herself. Clara leaned in and whispered, "You were brave today." Ida didn't speak. She simply wrapped her arms around her daughter, holding her tighter than she had in weeks. Outside, the wind blew, but it no longer sounded like a threat. It sounded like change. And for once, Ida Thornwick was not alone. The days that followed passed quietly, not with the silence of sorrow, but with the hush of something deeper peace. For the first time in weeks, Ida Thornwick awoke without dread, sitting heavy on her chest. The morning light no longer mocked her. The woodpile was stacked, the roof mended, and her children slept with full bellies. It wasn't the work itself that had nearly broken her, it was doing it all alone. And now, for once, she wasn't. Word about what had happened at the Thornwick homestead spread fast through the valley, but not in the way Cornelius Brem had hoped. Instead of scandal, the townsfolk spoke of bravery, of a widow who had stood her ground, a rancher who had done the right thing, and 2 children whose honesty had melted the ice around grown-up hearts. Cornelius himself became a quieter man. His name still came up in conversation, but now with less respect and more caution. He had tried to manipulate a tragedy for his own gain and was left red-faced, speechless in front of an entire community. But the most surprising change wasn't with the town. It was with Ida. She no longer hid behind strength that looked like silence. When someone offered a hand, she considered it. So when her children needed comfort, she no longer pretended not to be tired. She allowed herself to be vulnerable not as weakness, but as truth. The transformation didn't mean she stopped working. She still chopped some wood, still patched clothes, still tended to the hens. But now there were shared tasks, quiet visits, and helping hands. And something else had returned to her home: laughter. One snowy afternoon, a knock came at the door. Monty Caldwell stood there with a basket in one hand and a modest bouquet of pine and dried lavender in the other. I was hoping Clara might still like to help me name that calf, he said with a soft smile. Ida raised an eyebrow. A calf, born last week, stubborn as a mule, thought it only right she gets the honor after saving half my reputation. Clara squealed and ran for her boots before her mother could say yes or no. Monty hesitated at the threshold. I know things are different now. I'm not asking for anything, Ida, but if you ever need a friend, I'd be honored to count myself among them. Ida smiled, soft but certain. You already are, Monty. Thank you. That winter came early and hard. Snow piled high, winds howled. 4 days and temperatures dropped below what most could endure. But the Thornwick home stayed warm. Not just from the firewood, but from the people who continued to show up. Mrs. Patterson with books for the children, the deputy with extra preserves, ranch hands delivering hay for the goat. Clara insisted on naming Peanut. They had become a part of something larger than charity. They had become community. Ida never remarried. Not because no one asked, but because she didn't need to be saved. She had built a life on her own terms, and now that life included others, not above her, not rescuers, but neighbors. Equals dot as spring thawed the land. Clara and Jimmy grew stronger, taller, more joyful. The burden they'd carried, the worry, the hunger, the fear eased from their shoulders. And when they spoke of that winter in years to come, they never mentioned the cold. They only remembered how warm their home became when kindness finally came in from the cold. Years later, and Clara became a teacher, and Jimmy joined the local constable's office. People still asked him about that winter, the one where half the town came to their aid, and Clara would always say, "My mother once told me that sometimes accepting kindness is its own kind of courage." But I think what she really meant was, letting people care about you is one of the bravest things a person can do. As for Monty Caldwell, he kept coming around. Never demanding, never boasting, just a quiet presence with a steady heart. He helped others too, quietly and without fuss. But never again did he underestimate the cost of being kind in a world too quick to judge. And Ida, as she aged with grace, her hands still calloused, her eyes still sharp, but her spirit gentler. When someone knocked on her door asking for help, she never hesitated, because she remembered. She remembered the cold that nearly broke her, and the warmth that saved her.